The rain hammered against the metal roof of the communications tent at Forward Operating Base Mitchell, somewhere in the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Specialist Marcus Webb wiped the sweat from his forehead despite the cold, his fingers working methodically through the tangled wires of another damaged radio. 23 years old, thin-framed with perpetually oil-stained hands, Marcus had never imagined himself on the front lines. He was a communications technician, trained to repair equipment, not to fight. "Webb, you got that radio working yet?" Sergeant Hayes barked from the tent entrance, water dripping from his helmet. "Almost, Sergeant. The receiver's fried, but I can bypass it," Marcus replied without looking up, his voice steady but quiet. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery echoed through the valley. Marcus had been in country for 3 months, spending his days in the relative safety of the FOB, soldering circuit boards and replacing antennas. While infantry units pushed into hostile territory, he remained behind, invisible and essential. His mother's last letter sat folded in his pocket, her words echoing, "Stay safe, baby. Just fix the radios and come home." But tonight, everything would change. The emergency call came through at 2,147 hours. Bravo Company was pinned down, 12 miles north, communications completely severed. Captain Morrison stood in the operations center, his jaw clenched as he stared at the tactical map. Red markers indicated Bravo Company's last known position, surrounded by enemy combatants in a narrow mountain pass. Without communications, they couldn't call for air support or reinforcements. "We need a communications specialist on that bird in 15 minutes, Morrison announced, his voice cutting through the tension. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Specialist Webb, you're going," Morrison stated flatly. "Sir, I've never been outside the wire," Marcus stammered, his hands trembling slightly. "You're our best technician. Those men need you." Morrison's expression softened momentarily. "I wouldn't send you if there was another option." 12 minutes later, Marcus sat in the Black Hawk helicopter, clutching his toolkit like a lifeline. Beside him sat 4 battle-hardened Rangers, their faces painted with camouflage, weapons at the ready. The crew chief, a grizzled staff sergeant named Kowalski, leaned over and shouted above the rotor noise. "Stay close to us, kid. Don't be a hero. Just fix the radios and we'll get you out." The helicopter lifted off, tilting forward as it accelerated into the darkness. Through the open door, Marcus watched the FOB's lights disappear. The helicopter descended rapidly, and Marcus's stomach lurched. Tracer rounds suddenly streaked through the darkness like deadly fireflies, and the crew chief returned fire with a mounted machine gun, the deafening noise vibrating through Marcus's entire body. 30 seconds, the pilot shouted. The Rangers chambered rounds and checked their gear with practiced efficiency. Marcus's hands shook as he gripped his toolkit tighter. This wasn't supposed to be his war. He was supposed to stay safe, repair equipment, and go home. The Black Hawk flared hard, landing in a cloud of dust on a rocky outcrop. The Rangers immediately jumped out, weapons up, scanning for threats. Kowalski grabbed Marcus's shoulder. "Move. Now." Marcus stumbled out of the helicopter, his legs nearly buckling. The night air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. 50 yards away, he could see muzzle flashes and hear the distinctive crack of AK-47s. The Rangers formed a protective perimeter as the helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the darkness. "This way." Lieutenant Chen, Bravo Company's executive officer, emerged from behind a boulder, his uniform torn and bloodied. "Thank God you're here. Captain Rodriguez is wounded. Radio's completely dead." Chen led Marcus and the Rangers through a maze of boulders toward Bravo Company's position. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, sending stone fragments flying. Marcus kept his head down, following Chen's boots, his toolkit banging against his hip with every stumbling step. They reached a natural depression where Bravo Company had taken cover. 18 soldiers, some wounded, were spread out among the rocks, returning sporadic fire. Captain Rodriguez lay against a boulder, his leg bandaged, his face pale but alert. "You're the calm guy?" Rodriguez asked through gritted teeth. "Yes, sir." "Specialist Webb," Marcus replied, his voice barely steady. "The radio's over there. We took a hit from an RPG." Everything scrambled. Rodriguez gestured to a mangled PRC, 117 radio half buried under debris. Marcus crawled to the equipment, setting down his toolkit with trembling hands. The radio's casing was cracked, wires exposed, and the display shattered. This wasn't a simple fix. This was a miracle he'd need to perform under fire. "How long?" Chen asked, crouching beside him. Marcus swallowed hard, examining the damage. I don't know. Maybe an hour if I had proper light and no one was shooting at me." "You've got 20 minutes maximum," Rodriguez called out. "They're massing for another push." Marcus's hands moved instinctively, stripping wires and testing circuits despite the chaos around him. A soldier named Private Jackson held a red-filtered flashlight, shielding the glow with his body. Bullets continued to snap overhead, but Marcus forced himself to focus on the small world of copper wires and circuit boards before him. "You got family back home?" Jackson asked, his voice tense. "My mom." "Detroit," Marcus replied, not looking up as he soldered a connection. "She know you're out here playing hero?" "I'm not a hero. I'm just fixing a radio," Marcus muttered, wiping sweat from his eyes. An explosion erupted 30 yards away, showering them with dirt and small rocks. Jackson flinched but kept the light steady. Marcus's fingers never stopped working. He'd repaired hundreds of radios in training, in the safety of workshops and classrooms. But nothing had prepared him for this. The fear, the noise, the knowledge that lives depended on his skill. "They're moving up the left flank," someone shouted. Gunfire intensified. The Rangers and Bravo Company soldiers laid down suppressing fire, the night illuminated by muzzle flashes. Marcus blocked it all out, entering a state of pure concentration. Replace the damaged frequency module. Bypass the destroyed display. Reroute power through the secondary circuit. 10 minutes, Webb. Rodriguez called. Marcus's fingers bled from small cuts, but he didn't notice. He'd managed to restore basic power to the radio, but the transmission circuit remained dead. He stared at the damaged components, his mind racing through every training manual he'd memorized, every repair he'd ever made. "Webb, we're running out of time," Chen shouted, firing his rifle at shadows moving in the darkness. Then Marcus saw it, a hairline fracture in the antenna connection, nearly invisible even under Jackson's flashlight. He grabbed a spare connector from his toolkit, his hands suddenly steady. This was what he'd been trained for. This single moment. He made the repair, tightened the connection, and flipped the power switch. Static crackled through the speaker. Marcus grabbed the handset with shaking hands. "Bravo 6, this is Webb. Radio check, over." Nothing but static. His heart sank. "Come on," he whispered, adjusting the frequency dial. "Come on. Webb, this is Overwatch. We read you 5 by 5. Bravo 6, what's your situation?" The voice of the FOB Communications Center came through clearly, and Marcus felt a wave of relief so intense he nearly collapsed. Rodriguez grabbed the handset. "Overwatch, Bravo 6. We are danger close. Request immediate air support. Sending coordinates now." Marcus had done it. The radio worked. The next 15 minutes felt like hours. Rodriguez coordinated with the FOB while Chen organized the defense. The enemy was closing in, their numbers overwhelming. Bravo Company was out of options, until the radio crackled with a transmission that changed everything. "Bravo 6, this is Hammer 2-1. 2 Apache gunships inbound, ETA 3 minutes. Mark your position." Soldiers scrambled to activate infrared strobes, marking their location for the pilots. Marcus stayed by the radio, ensuring the connection remained stable, his entire purpose now reduced to keeping those circuits alive. The distinctive thump of Apache rotors grew louder, and then the night erupted with devastating precision. The gunship's chain guns roared, their 30mm rounds tearing through enemy positions. Hellfire missiles streaked from the helicopters, turning the mountainside into an inferno. "This is Hammer 2-1. Enemy neutralized. You're clear for evac." Soldiers cheered, some crying with relief. Rodriguez clasped Marcus's shoulder firmly. "You saved us, son. Every single one of us." Marcus couldn't respond, his body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Jackson patted his back roughly. "Not bad for a radio guy." Within minutes, the Black Hawks arrived for extraction. Wounded soldiers were loaded first, then the rest of the company. Marcus was the last to board, clutching his toolkit. The flight back to FOB Mitchell was surreal. Marcus sat in silence, surrounded by soldiers who treated him differently now. They weren't dismissive or condescending anymore. They looked at him with respect, even gratitude. Private Jackson sat beside him, their shoulders touching in the crowded helicopter. "You did good out there, Webb." "Real good," Jackson said, loud enough to be heard over the rotors. At the FOB, medical personnel rushed to treat the wounded. Captain Rodriguez, despite his injury, pulled Marcus aside before being taken to the aid station. "I'm putting you in for a commendation. What you did tonight, that was extraordinary courage." "I just fixed a radio, sir," Marcus replied quietly. "No. You went outside the wire, worked under fire, and saved 18 lives. That's not just anything." Rodriguez's grip was firm on his shoulder. "Your mother should be proud." Later, alone in his tent, Marcus sat on his cot and pulled out his mother's letter. His hands still trembled slightly. He thought about writing to her, telling her what happened, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain that the scared kid who fixed radios had become something more? That he'd found courage he didn't know he possessed? 3 weeks later, FOB Mitchell's parade ground was unusually formal. Soldiers stood in formation as Captain Morrison stepped forward, a small wooden box in his hands. Marcus stood at attention, his uniform pressed, boots polished, feeling entirely out of place. "Specialist Marcus Webb," Morrison began, his voice carrying across the assembled troops. "For exceptional courage under enemy fire, and for actions that directly resulted in the preservation of 18 American lives, you are hereby awarded the Bronze Star with Valor Device." Morrison pinned the medal to Marcus's chest as soldiers applauded. Marcus saw tears in some eyes, particularly those of Bravo Company soldiers who'd been there that night. Rodriguez, now on crutches, saluted him sharply. After the ceremony, Marcus called home. His mother's voice broke when he told her about the medal. "My baby. My brave boy," she sobbed through the phone. "Mom, I'm okay. I'm safe," Marcus assured her, though the memory of that night still haunted his sleep. "When are you coming home?" 4 months. "I'll be home in 4 months." That night, Marcus sat outside his tent, looking at the stars above the Afghan mountains. He was still a communications technician. He still fixed radios. But something fundamental had changed within him. Marcus Webb returned to Detroit 8 months later, completing his service with honor. The Bronze Star sat in a frame in his childhood bedroom, but he rarely looked at it. He enrolled in community college, studying electrical engineering, his goals now clearer than ever. At a Veterans Support Group meeting 6 months after his return, Marcus met Jackson, who'd also returned stateside. They embraced like brothers. "How you doing, man?" Jackson asked. "Good. Better. You?" Marcus replied. "Getting there. Listen, I tell everyone about that night. About what you did." Marcus shrugged uncomfortably. "I was just doing my job." "That's what heroes always say," Jackson smiled. Years later, Marcus would become an engineer, designing communication systems for emergency responders. He married, had children, built a quiet life. But sometimes, late at night, he'd remember that moment in the Afghan mountains, the weight of the toolkit, the crack of gunfire, the desperate hope that his hands wouldn't fail. They'd sent him to fix radios. But that night, he'd fixed something far more important. He'd reconnected isolated soldiers to hope, to help, to survival. And in doing so, he'd discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. Marcus Webb was a technician. But for one crucial night, he was exactly the hero his brothers in arms needed.